So hi guys, I'm here today with Jenni Gritters, who is a Seattle-based freelance writer. And Jenni focuses on health-related topics such as life outdoors, psychological research, parenting, and she does a lot of reviews of outdoor products. She's recently started a podcast on life as a freelance writer that's called the Writers Co-op. And you can access that anywhere that you can access podcasts. Is that correct?
Yep, that's right.
Okay. And did I miss anything about what you do?
I don't think so. Yeah, I'm a trained journalist, so I do a mix of journalistic writing and then also some work for brands, and have been a full-time freelancer for a couple of years now.
Great. And so I've asked Jenni to join me today because I want to talk to you guys about an important topic, which is how you can survive as a freelance writer in this marketplace, and maybe some thoughts on what you can do as a emerging college graduate in this marketplace in the wake of COVID-19 and the economy crashing, I guess, or stalling out and not being what it was just a few months ago. So I have some thoughts on that, but I wanted to bring in another person to help me share their ideas because it's such a big and important topic. So Jenni, do you have any thoughts just off the top of your head about this?
I think this is a really tough time to be trying to dive into media in general, right? Like we're seeing this week a lot of layoffs, and I do think it's scary. Like I want to say, even as like someone who's an established freelancer, like it's sort of a weird, chaotic time. It's tough to plan ahead, but I do think there's some things you can do to sort of pad your landing, if you will, during this time. So maybe places to look for work that are less popular, things like that. So we should talk about that today, but I do just want to say it's valid if it's scary and challenging. I think this, working in a recession for yourself is just by its very nature unstable and requires some hustle.
I think that's a great point because it has definitely been scary for me as well. And I don't do as much journalism as you do. I do more straight marketing writing and working for companies and hospitals, but I do a lot of, hustling to find my own work. And yeah, it's been a scary time. So I think it's a great thing to acknowledge right off the bat. So what changes have you seen to the freelance market since?
Yeah, so many. So I should also say I'm just coming back from maternity leave in the midst of this. So obviously the timing is a little bit bizarre for me to also have a young child at home. But I think it makes sense to mention that just because, my decision-making is sort of, dictated by the fact that I am providing for a child now. So, for me, I came back from this 3-month hiatus and a couple of my big contracts had been canceled. So, I do work for, you mentioned I do outdoor reviews and write outdoor guides. A lot of that work was for REI, right? And they obviously had to close all their stores. So, I'm experiencing definite like budget cuts from a lot of my clients, a lot of notes from them about how they would love to continue working with me, but there may be a hiatus in terms of some of the projects we had planned to work together. And then just think like some extra hustle required to find new gigs. Like I think more people, obviously people are being laid off. So it does feel like there are more candidates for fewer positions. But I've also experienced people moving a little bit faster. I don't know if you've experienced this, but like when I reach out to them, I am getting responses pretty quickly. People want to make hiring decisions pretty quickly. Has been kind of an interesting thing.
I have noticed that. Yes.
Yeah. So
yes, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that surprised me a little bit. But I think like the companies that are hiring are actually like moving very quickly, more quickly than I had seen in the past.
Yes. So I had one contact and it was somebody else at an organization I've worked with before. It was at Multicare, which is a hospital chain in the South Sound. And they contacted me to write some website copy. And it was like, I got a call on a Friday and I was out running errands, and I just like I missed the call. So I returned the phone call and said, yeah, I'm interested, let's maybe connect on Monday, or, send me an email and we'll set up a time. And I got a return phone call or text or something that said, oh no, we want to talk to you like in the next half hour, and we want the copy written this weekend. And I was like, oh my gosh, yeah. Okay, well, I can make that work. But yeah, it was just a time frame that I am not used to.
Yeah, I wonder if it's because the places that do have budget to hire people are totally swamped. This is what I've been thinking about. So there's like, a lot of my clients don't have budget right now. And so they are not able to provide me with work for the next 2 to 3 months, let's say. But then the other half who are like overwhelmed, like I've noticed like legal companies, places that are dealing with like caregiving, a lot of places that are doing any kind of health oriented stuff, right? Like they are all slammed. And so they seem to need things very quickly. So the pace seems to be kind of a little bit different. And it does seem to be like longer periods of not finding work, and then like random periods of a ton of stuff that's landing. So yeah, it's just, I think that feels different to me. And like I said, also the amount of hustle required to find this stuff. Like I am definitely sending out more emails than I used to, which is partially because I've, the stable of clients, my little, chunk of stable people that I usually work with, some of them have disappeared. So I'm having to send more emails, but it does feel like there's a little bit more marketing on my part, where I'm reaching out to people more than I have in the past.
Yeah, I've noticed that too on my end. I've noticed a lot of, I've having to do a lot more of just like sending out emails or contacting people, and then doing more of just like posting blog entries online, and doing more just of marketing myself than I have in the past. Or I mean, I have done that in the past, but
It's more, yeah.
But like 3 months ago, things were just kind of coming in at a rate that was so fast that I didn't have time to do as much of that marketing.
Totally. I feel like I'm in the same boat. Like the past 2 years, I've mostly been given assignments, and it feels like there's more onus on me now to be pitching and reaching out to people, which I just didn't have to do in the past, which makes sense because there's less work and more people trying to get it. But and I just say there's like the little existential stress in the mix of like, even for me just personally, my pace of work has been really interesting. Like some days I feel really motivated to do things, and some days I'm like, oh, I'm just overwhelmed. And I've heard that from a lot of freelancers actually, that the sort of emotional state with which you approach your work is very up and down. And I think that I've talked to some folks about, the 2008 recession. It sounds like actually that is something that tends to happen when you're working for yourself and trying to get work. There's sort of like a roller coaster that goes on when it's harder to find it. So I've actually been kind of like comforted by the fact that other people seem to feel that too.
Yeah, that is very validating to hear.
Yeah.
Last week, like around Thursday, I just took a mental day off and said to myself, like, I'll work Saturday instead, because I just can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm totally there too. So yeah.
Well, that's really nice to hear.
Yeah. Good.
Thanks. So we talked a little bit about this in terms of like, you have to market yourself more, but what would you recommend freelancers do to adapt to some of these changes that we're seeing?
Yeah, I have been thinking a lot about like chasing, I guess I'll call them smaller fish. There are these big brands. As a journalist, there are all these big publications, The Atlantic, The New York Times, right? Those publications now are more swamped than ever before. And so I've been thinking a lot about how if I send a pitch, it lands on an editor's desk, and instead of having 20 pitches to look at, they probably have 65. And they're probably also dealing with all the stressors of what's going on. So I've been less apt to direct my marketing at larger places and more apt to look to like trade publications, organizations in my community who might need help, things like that, thinking about aiming a little bit smaller. I also think those places sometimes have more budget, right? Like journalism in general, the ad revenue is dropping because people can't put money there right now. So there isn't a ton of money there. So I've been thinking about, kind of exploring other corners of the industry, figuring out, the topics I write about. Are there trade publications, university publications that might be interested in my work or need my help? And that so far I think has proven more lucrative than reaching out to these places that are more popular, like have a reputation.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great idea, especially for people who are starting out in the field. It's good way to build up a reputation for yourself instead of just trying to jump right to the New York Times.
Yeah, exactly. I think no matter what, actually, if you're just starting out, I usually recommend that, right? To kind of learn, starting, I don't want to say lower in the totem pole, but like starting with like people who are easy for you to reach, and maybe there's someone there. I've been talking a lot. I do coaching, freelance business coaching. I've been talking a lot to my clients also about figuring out who they know, and starting there, right? So in terms of looking for work, like, do you know people who work for companies that might need writers? Do you know not just other writers and editors, but like people in your life who might have connections, and starting there? Because right now it's also, I think, tough to convince someone who you don't have a relationship with to just choose you, because they might not have a ton of budget. It's a risk for them. And so having someone who can vouch for you, I feel like also can smooth out that process a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I always try to tell people to, networking is where a lot of these good contacts are going to come from, right? And I know from your podcast that you like to call it relationship building, right? You just connecting with people and talking to people, and you are getting to know people, and then eventually you do enough of that and you've got a network or a community basically of people in your field that and who will go to bat for you and will stand up for you or can advocate for you and say, hey, I know Jenny, hey, I know Jessica, and she's a good person to hire.
Right. And that feels more important now, I think. But I was talking to someone who's like, I don't have a network. How do I do that now? I do think also people have time right now. So if there are editors who've been laid off, if there are people in your community who are also trying to be freelance writers, or work in the same area as you, like, I told someone the other day, create a freelancer pod, like 5 or 6 people where you share contacts, where you share pitches, where you are bouncing ideas off each other. This time feels very isolating, I think. And so having like a group of people who are also experiencing some of these same things and who can also like trade around opportunities feels to me very smart, even if it's on Zoom, right? Like even if it's
great idea
remotely, because we all, as you said before we started recording, like being stuck in one place creatively is actually very difficult. And so bringing at least other people virtually into that space has been helping me a little bit. Bouncing pitches off other people and hearing about what they're doing, finding interesting strategies, hearing about random publications that I didn't know about, things like that.
I love that idea. And I think the thing that, I think it's a good thing to think about even as a beginning freelancer. You can offer something to somebody else because you may not have the connections, but you can help them work through their piece or offer them another point of view on it. And
totally. And I do think there's strength in numbers too, right? So even, when I'm talking to classes about this, I'll say like, just because you're a new freelancer doesn't mean that you don't have anything to offer. Like you said, like even teaming up with a group of 5 other new people, there's strength in numbers. And you all know different people. You all have learned different things in your schooling, in your career. And sharing that is, I think, actually pretty useful right now. It's sort of like a free skills share, right? Like you don't have to pay anything for the support. And right now, when there's less money to trade around, like, having that sort of emotional support, coaching each other, feels really like important to me right now, no matter where you're at.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I always, when we talk about like networking or building a community, I always like to remind people that most of the connections are not going to lead to work for you. But community building is always nice. It's always nice to have that emotional support. But you're going to hear stories from people about, oh, this connection did this for me and I got this magic job that was the best job of my career from that connection. So people aren't going to tell you about the 25 or 50 other networking attempts they made that didn't do anything.
Right. Totally. I totally hear that.
A lot of it is just meeting people, and that's great. And you have other people in your community, but you're not going to hear about the experiences that don't pay off.
Yeah, I also, I got laid off a couple of years ago. That's why I started freelancing, and I talk about this on the podcast. But right after I got laid off, I did a lot of informational interviewing, which is something that I think like in college they told me to do, but it was basically just like talking to people about what their jobs were because I wasn't sure that I really wanted to keep doing this.
Yeah.
And I talked to a lot of people who weren't journalists. But through those conversations, once I decided to launch a freelance business, I told them all, I'm going to freelance now. A lot of them said, oh, let me introduce you to, this other random person that I know. And I ended up getting work through that. So I do think if there's a lull, if there's like a pause, if you're just graduating and you're trying to figure out what to do, talking to people, it's that like 20-minute, we talk about this on like Jessica said, the relationship building episode of our podcast, but 20 minutes for your time. Like, can I have 20 minutes of your time just to hear about what, how you started your career and ask very specific questions?
Yeah.
Usually people will say yes to that, especially right now. People are lonely, and
Yeah,
want to talk.
yeah.
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 And even if, like you said, that directly doesn't lead to a job, I have found that like those things kind of spread, right?
Yeah.
And can at some point probably help you, even if it's not right now.
And something that I've really learned from you is don't be afraid to tell people you're looking for work.
Yeah. That's my, I always do that. It's like very shameless self-promotion, right? But it's like, I have room for 2 more clients next month. I say this, like I have space in my schedule for 2 more clients. And I'd love to talk to you about working together. And that seems to work better than I'm not begging them for work, but I'm letting them know that there are gaps in my schedule. Where we could work together. So I do that a lot.
And I don't know where this came from. It may have come from you, but somebody mentioned this to me, and I love this tip that when you're looking for work and somebody says, like, oh, how's your career search going? How's your job search going? Turn it around on them and make them an ally for you in your job search then and say, oh, when they ask you that question, that is their way of saying to you, how can I help you in your job search? So when somebody says, how's your job search going? That's when you can say, I'm looking for a public relations job and I'd love to be with a technology company. If you know anyone, let me know.
Totally. I've actually been doing that right now. So I have a part-time editing gig that's ending in like a month and a half. And I want to replace it with a similar sort of thing, right? With a part-time editing gig in sort of a certain topic area in outdoors or parenting. And so I've been telling people that, right? Like when they ask me how things are going, I'm like, I'm doing great. If you hear of, a 20-hour-a-week editing job that is on these topics, will you please let me know?
Yeah.
And actually a few people have already sent me different options, right? So like it takes way too long to scour the internet for opportunities. Like you're going to miss them. And so having people keep their ears open, really, I think makes a huge difference. They're like you said, they're like, bring them into your ally team, right? Like let them help you. And I think that's a big thing. Like let people help you. Like it just because you're asking for help doesn't mean that you're not doing well. That's actually like how my business runs, is to ask other people to help.
100%. Yeah. Awesome. So is there any final advice you would give to people who are looking to freelance part-time or full-time?
Yeah, I think I've been thinking a lot about this time, especially if you were just graduating and trying to kind of, step into this arena. And I've always recommended that people get staff jobs right out the gate in terms of skill building. And I still think there are some good jobs out there, especially if you want to do content marketing. Or traditional media journalism jobs may be fewer, but I was reading today about there is still a ton of content marketing going on. So looking for a place where you can build skills right now, I do think is important. Like trying to step into being a freelancer and not having a ton of experience, you're up against a lot of other people now. And so, as I love freelancing, but I do think at this point, it does kind of make sense to establish yourself and create a network if you can, but while you're looking for those things, to still be sort of sending out pitches, looking for things, and to be sort of tenacious. And I always say to my coaching clients, like, keep going. Like, I think like I talk to them every few weeks and I'm like, there's no one else telling you like, keep going when you're working for yourself, and like, keep going. The slow plod will eventually get you somewhere. And I think that's important to acknowledge, because it may be a little slower right now. But tenacity sort of wins the day, right?
Tenacity is a good word. You need tenacity.
Yeah, Totally. Totally. And I think like also one thing I talk to people a lot about is sort of connecting to their values and why they want to do this, so that when you are getting a lot of no's, or on a day when it is difficult, having a reason that sort of keeps you going, I think is also important right now. It's always important, but especially when it may take a little longer to get a yes, you know, understanding why you like doing this and what the point is, and maybe finding ways to create those opportunities for yourself, blogging, you know, creating content in some other way while you're looking for things, to keep yourself sort of creatively moving, also I think is a good idea.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jenni.
Yeah, of course.
I appreciate it. So is there anything that you are doing right now that you want to like pitch or have the students look at?
I would just say listen to our podcast if you're considering, working as a freelance writer or editor, or content producer. We have a lot of good tips in there. We talk about our story. I run the podcast with a journalist named Wudan Yan, who does a lot of really big international reporting trips. So sort of a cool contrast between my career and hers. And we would love to, you know, like hear from you too. We always like to get emails hearing about what people, you know, what people want to hear about. We're about to start recording season 2. So it's called the REI Co-Op. And you can find it anywhere, iTunes, Spotify.
I loved I think it was the most recent one about
getting paid. Yes.
Yeah.
If you pay me, chasing payment. So, you know, the podcast really centers around these sort of logistical tips of getting a career set up. So the first episode, we have a membership on Patreon too. And if you sign up, you get worksheets that'll help you business plan and create a money plan and things like that. And I think a lot of that is just sort of absent from freelancer education, like all these logistics. How do you figure out how to get paid on time? What do you look for in a contract? Stuff like that. So all of that is in the podcast. Like pretty much everything that's in our brains has been downloaded over there. So it's a great place to
awesome.
Take a little mini course. Yeah.
Work. Yeah, it's really helpful.
Cool. I'm glad. Well, it was great to see you.
Good to see you.
Yes.
Well, good luck with your workshop today.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenni.
Bye.
Bye.